The Holy Gospel according to St. John, the first chapter. Glory be to thee, O Lord. And this is the testimony of John, when the Jews sent priests and Levites from Jerusalem to ask him, "Who are you?" He confessed, and did not deny, but confessed, "I am not the Christ." And they asked him, "What then? Are you Elijah?" He said, "I am not." "Are you the prophet?" And he answered, "No." So they said to him, "Who are you? We need to give an answer to those who sent us. What do you say about yourself?" He said, "I am the voice of one crying out in the wilderness, 'Make straight the way of the Lord,' as the prophet Isaiah said." Now they had been sent from the Pharisees. And they asked him, "Then why are you baptizing, if you are neither the Christ, nor Elijah, nor the prophet?" John answered them, "I baptize with water, but among you stands one you do not know, even he who comes after me, the strap of whose sandal I am not worthy to untie." These things took place in Bethany, across the Jordan, where John was baptizing. This is the gospel of the Lord. Praise be to thee, O Christ. I want to know, don't you, if John was just having a bit of fun. Who are you? I'm not the Christ. Well, who are you? Are you Elijah? No, I'm not. Are you the prophet? No. Who are you? Tell us, they say. But John is not interested in answering their question. At least it doesn't seem that he is, does it? It sounds almost like a riddle game of sorts that your kids might play, trying to guess who one another is. It almost sounds like 20 questions. Are you the Christ? No. Messiah? No. Prophet? No. Who are you, John? We need an answer. The Pharisees want to know who John is, but John only seems interested in telling them who he's not. But like dogs with a bone, they keep holding on, don't they? They need an answer. They need an answer because, well, they've been told to get one. And in obsessing over John's identity, in holding on to that bone, who are you, John? They miss the whole point. I am a voice in the wilderness crying out, "Make straight the way of the Lord." John wants them to ask about that. Ask me about the Lord and I'll tell you anything. Ask me about myself and I'll tell you nothing. But they don't take the bait, do they? They're stuck on John. Why are you baptizing? You're not the Christ, you're not Elijah, you're not the prophet. And so John tries to set the trap for them one more time. He lays the bait for them. I baptize with water, but behind me, in your midst, stands one you do not know, even he who comes after me, the straps of whose sandals I am not worthy to untie. Ask me about him. Will they drop their silly questions about John? Will they sink their teeth into something far better than a bone? Will they ask the question that John is willing to answer or not? Well, apparently not, right? You get the impression from reading that gospel reading that we heard this morning that they're content to walk away. They must have felt like they got enough for their dossier. They'd collected their intel. No need for further curiosity. No need to identify the one greater than John. And so they leave with nothing. They know neither John nor the greater one who stood in their midst. You get this picture when you hear it, don't you? That John didn't just toss them a slow pitch to hit. He put it on a tee. All they had to do was swing. All they had to do was deviate from their script for just a minute, to listen to John for just a minute and ask about the greater one. But they didn't. Why not? Why don't they ask about the one person John is willing to talk about? Well, we're told that they were part of the Pharisaical party. And it's unclear just how widespread the Pharisees' control was. But what we do know is this: they were interested in control. You've probably heard the two groups at that time in Judaism were the Pharisees and the Sadducees. And I think if we kept reading, if we had all the time in the world, we could talk about the differences between the two, but just put it in your mind this way. The Sadducees had power in Jerusalem. The Pharisees had power everywhere outside of Jerusalem. And they wanted to consolidate that power. They wanted more power, which is what people in power always want. And so when John burst onto the scene, they did what ambitious people do. They sent out an inquiry. They wanted to test the waters. Would he be useful to them or not? If he would be useful to them, how could they use him? And if he wouldn't be useful to them, how could they eliminate him? But John doesn't play that game, does he? He's not interested in such things as who has power at what time and place. The machinations of the Pharisees have no pull on the great prophet. He is single-minded on one thing and one thing only: to make known the Messiah, the Christ, the great prophet. That's all that matters. That is all that matters to John, Jesus. Today is about identities, who you are, and perhaps more importantly, who you are not. Who are you? That was the question John had no interest in answering. He only cared about who he was not. Now consider how you would answer that question this morning. Don't we all want to be asked this question? Who are you? Oh, my favorite topic. Who am I? Let me tell you. I'm glad you asked. My favorite subject, after all. Now, there are some of you I know in this room who are very shy, right? You don't want to answer that question, but we all want it to be asked of us. There is a desire in each of us to be inquired about, to be noticed, to be recognized, to be asked about. And we enjoy talking about ourselves, even if we don't go on and on and on. Our likes and dislikes, our hobbies and interests, our own stories, where we are always, or almost always anyways, the gallant heroes or the tragic victims. Of course, social media doesn't inflame this at all, does it? We only defer to other people there. We would never spend all day talking about ourselves and checking back to see, is anyone paying attention? How many clicks have I received? Consider how you would answer that question this morning. Who are you? Defining ourselves is not always an easy thing, at least not the way that we want to be known. Everyone wants to be unique, don't they? We want to be special. We want to be different. And so we are rarely content with how we actually are. We kind of exaggerate the stories. We set out to find ourselves, except no one really knows what that means or how you're supposed to go about finding yourself. But I can guess that the journey of self-discovery, what it means to discover yourself, usually means finding the things you like to do and then doing them. Finding the things that bring you pleasure and doing them. But the trouble is, those things don't just fall into your lap. They have to be refined and worked at. It only really works in movies, doesn't it? Where the hero or the heroine kind of discover who they are, what their purpose is, in a flash. For the rest of us, in real life, it comes on a long, long journey. In fact, our whole life could be understood this way, couldn't it? Throughout your life, you are discovering who you are. You are being refined by God, and your character is being developed. And so it's actually kind of hard to answer, who am I? It's hard to answer that question. But here's what's so helpful about John's witness today. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter. And I don't say that to, put you down or something. I say that, first of all, to myself, but also to you as well. It doesn't matter who we are. It's really not that important. If anyone could have laid claim on being special, on being unique and different, it would have been the great Baptist. If anyone could have said, I'm worth knowing, I'm worth talking about, it would have been John. He was, after all, prophesied by Isaiah. And in fact, it wasn't just Isaiah, but Malachi prophesied of him. And Jesus would later say what John wouldn't say about himself. He was Elijah. So why doesn't he talk about himself? If he's so special, if he's so important, why doesn't he do what all of us would love to do and say, pay attention to me? Why does he answer so shortly? Why is he only interested in who he is not? Because John knows that there is one thing needful. And it isn't to know who he is, it is to know who Jesus is. When we have driven through the Appalachian Mountains on our vacation, there are sometimes these signs that say scenic overlook. Maybe you've seen them before yourself. John is that sign. But none of us would stop at the sign, would we, and take our pictures in front of the sign? None of us would stop and pay attention to the sign and say, look how blue it is. Isn't it so beautiful? You want to get to the actual thing. You want to get to the thing that the sign is telling you about. And in fact, you can't miss it when you're driving through the mountains. When you're driving through those mountains and the scene opens up in front of you, you can't help but say, wow, it's beautiful. I wish I could pull the car over. John is just a sign. And just as no one should stop and stare at the sign or take their selfie in front of a sign, so John is not interested in us pausing with him. His identity is a minor factor. Sadly, though, the Pharisees love to major in the minors. They strain out the flies but swallow the camels. John, though, John isn't interested in such things. He's just a voice. What matters is the other one who comes after him. He is the greater one. If John is just a voice, then we are to understand Jesus as the full-figured person, the body, the soul, the mind, the voice, everything. He is the substantial one, the one full of being and meaning and significance, the one who it is our supreme pleasure to know. Why do we make such a big deal about ourselves? Why do we lay so much emphasis on our identity, on our uniqueness, on our value? Of course, I know the answer to those things. We all want to be seen and heard and remembered. But the truth is that we are very much like John, passing voices. I am not the Christ, and neither are you. I am not Elijah, and neither are you. I am not the prophet, and neither are you. But that doesn't mean that we don't matter or that our life is meaningless. It simply means that our identity is not that important. It means that someone else is. There is the Christ, there is the prophet, and knowing him is what matters. Among you stands one you don't know. Why don't you ask about him? That's what John is hinting at. That's what he's trying to get the questioners to question. The straps of his sandals I am not even worthy to untie. How could John go on talking about himself when the Lord was in his midst? It'd be like a little candle boasting about how bright it is while the sun is shining down from above. No, John's identity, our identity, is overshadowed by someone far superior. That someone stood among people who did not know him. The Lord God, the eternal Son, as far superior to John and to us as the creator of the house is to the house itself. The creator wore the frame of his creatures, and in, with, and under that flesh and blood, the Son of God dwelt so that he could be seen, so that he could be heard and touched and felt and smelled and known. Christ stood among the unworthy long ago. He stood among people who were caught up in their schemes and their devices and their machinations. He stood among people just like you. He stood among the unworthy. He came to those who couldn't even boast they should be able to touch his sandals. He came, the Messiah, the Lord, the Master, the Prophet, and he came in the form of a servant. The one who ranks above all and over all, he in whom all things hold together, came as a servant. He came unrecognized and unknown. Though they could never deserve to touch his sandals, this one came. And he exemplified his great love. He revealed his identity by taking their feet. You remember, don't you, how Jesus knelt down like a servant on the night in which he was betrayed, how on that fateful Thursday night, he washed the feet of his own disciples. And when he stood up from that servant's task, he made known his identity even more fully by offering himself in their place on the altar of the cross. Not just washing feet, but washing away sin. Not just serving at a table, but saving from sin and death and hell. You want to know what's worth asking about? You want to know what's worth inquiring about and talking about? It is this one, Jesus. Take John's hint. It is Jesus that we must ask about. It is Jesus that we must know. It is Jesus, always Jesus, more and more and more Jesus. He still is the one who stands among the unworthy. He still stands unknown by so many who may be able to say his name or perhaps even tell some part of his story, but who do not know the power of his resurrection, who do not know him by faith, who do not know how far superior it is to know him than to know anything about ourselves. Today is certainly about identity. John's and yours, sure, but only by way of negation. Today we learn who we are not, and we take delight in that. It doesn't matter who we are. Do you see? It doesn't matter how many people know you and recognize you and love you and talk about you and inquire about you. None of that matters. What matters is Jesus, his identity, his love for you, his care for you, his concern for you. It is in the identity of Jesus that all our identities are bound up. Knowing him, we learn what he has made of us. Knowing our unworthiness, but his willingness to be known by us. Knowing our unworthiness, but his willingness to come among us. This is what gives us value. This is what gives us an identity. How much silliness the Lord had to put up with long ago. The machinations, the devices of the Pharisees and the Sadducees and all of those people, all of their little schemes, how much silliness it all must have seemed to him. And how much silliness he still puts up with in us. How he must watch our vain efforts to promote ourselves and our agendas, to gain our recognition and honor, to our signaling of this, that, or the other thing. How he must watch it all and sigh and say, don't they know? Don't they know? That doesn't matter. What need have we to promote ourselves when we are known by the Lord? You are his handiwork. You are his creature. And what's more, you are his redeemed child, a precious treasure to him. You are baptized in his name, stamped with his love. He does not forget those who he marks. And you are even his dwelling place, the temple of his Holy Spirit, who is at work now to make you holy. John laid the bait for those priests, for those Levites. They came seeking his identity, and he would have given them something far superior. But they were too full of themselves. They were too caught up in their own agenda. Don't make that mistake. Do not let this Christmas and this season pass you by because you are so caught up in the busyness of your identity and your life. Learn to find the ultimate value and meaning not in knowing who you are, but in knowing who the Christ is. Forget yourself for a time today, and let your mind and your heart consider the greater one who still deigns to dwell among the unworthy. Fix your eyes on Jesus. Fix your trust on Jesus. Fix your hope on Jesus. Dwell on him and his identity. Know who you are not, and know who he is. To him be the glory now and always. Amen. Rise together now and sing the words of the offering.